Hello everybody and welcome to another Python 3 tutorial video. In this video what we're going to be talking about is another one of our standard library modules, and that's going to be Url Lib. The idea of Url Lib is it allows you to, via Python, access the internet. So just like the internet, it allows you to do all sorts of amazing things. Url Lib is going to let you do all sorts of the same amazing things, only using Python in your programming language. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So there's only a few, a few core things that you need to do in order to connect and get data from the internet. But then there's slightly more advanced topics that we do need to cover with Url Lib, but we'll get there. It's luckily still a fairly simple module. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to need to import Url Lib. Now, if you're coming from Python 2.7, you're used to just needing to do import Url Lib or import Url Lib 2, and that's it. Whereas with Python 3 and onward, you actually have to do, you're going to be more so doing at least import url lib.request. And when you do like URL open, for example, you'll have to do url lib.request.url open and so on. But anyway, more on that in a little bit. So an example of visiting a website will be as follows. So let's say we'll define a variable as x. And we'll say x equals url lib.request.url open, and then in these parameters is where we specify the address that we want to visit. You always have to lead this with HTTP or HTTPS. So for example, HTTPS : / and let's go to www.google.com. Okay. And then, so that what this is going to do is going to make a request to that URL, okay? And this is by default, it will be a GET request, so it's going to get some data, and that's it. Now, what we can do is we could say, or let's do print x.read, so we're reading the request. So we can now save and run this. And this is our output, just a whole bunch of, gobbledygook text. But this is basically the source code of google.com. So for example, we could open up a browser and we could go to the top, go google.com, hit U, and or control U rather, and this is the source code, right? So again, it is just a bunch of junk here, but you get the idea that this is what we've done, is we've used Python to reach this page. Okay, so we can minimize that. Let's go ahead and close out of that too. And naturally, as time goes on, and we're going to cover that very soon, but when you visit a URL, you're going to need to parse that page a little bit. So you're not as interested in the HTML as you are in like paragraph text, for example. You're probably going to only care about paragraph text. So we're going to have to show how to handle that. And actually how to handle that, we'll be using another standard library, so have no fear, we'll be covering that very shortly. So the next thing I want to talk about is post. So for example, if we were to go to, let's say, we go back to where we were and we do the following. Let's say we want to go to pythonprogramming.net. And that's where we can get all of our sample code if you're not familiar. But if we scroll down to the bottom, there's actually a search bar here. We could search, and let's say we search for basic, okay? And you get a bunch of search results for the keyword basic. But if you look at our URL, you see that we have some extra stuff added to the end of our pythonprogramming.net. So what do we have? Well, we've got a question mark, then we've got a character S, then we've got the equal sign, basic, and then an and sign, and then submit, and an equal sign in search. So with a little bit of deduction and reasoning, we could assume that submit is a variable and S is a variable, and they've been defined as S equals basic and submit equals search. And that is true. So if you look at variables, or at least links that have variables in it, the first variable will have a question mark and then the variable name equals, and then all subsequent variables are going to have this little and sign and then the variable equals, and it continues on like that. So that's this is an example of a GET request. We're getting data based on these well, actually it's a post, right? We're getting data based on these posted variables. So let's say we want to make a post request. Now, first of all, you could just do a get to this URL, right? You could just use a request and put in this URL. But the other thing that we can do, and the more Pythonic thing that we're supposed to do, is go to pythonprogramming.net, add in these values, and do a post to pythonprogramming.net. So let's go ahead and show how that's supposed to be done. So here I'm just going to comment this out because we don't need to be printing that out every time. Just wanted to show an example. I'm also going to comment this out because otherwise it's just going to be visiting every time, and we don't need to do that. Now we're going to import another thing, and that's going to be import urllib.parse, and this is going to help us parse values to our post request. So a little bit different. This one's going to be a little bit longer to get data, but just bear with me. So first we're going to say URL, and this is just going to be what URL, what's like the base URL that we want to visit. And the base URL, again, always lead in with http:// we're pythonprogramming.net. That's it. Then we're going to have a dictionary, and we're going to say this dictionary is called values. And then empty parameters for now, but very quickly, we're going to say S, and that S corresponds to basic, and then comma. And then our next value is, if you recall, submit. And that submit was called search. So I don't know if I closed it or not. No, we didn't. Okay. So our first thing, so it's basically keyword, key and value, like a dictionary. Our keyword is the variable, and then this is the variable's definition, basically. So that's values. Now what we do is we come down, and we're going to say data. So this is going to be data from the website equals urllib.parse.url encode. And we want to encode values. So first we're just encoding simply values. And what URL encode is going to do is it's going to encode it as it should be in the URL. So for example, if we go back to where we've been working and we go to like google.com and we did a search for hey, check that out, okay? You see that it's hey plus check plus that plus out. You could also do the query as this, hey, check that out. At least usually it's not fit. There it goes. Okay. And you can see that it has changed now to hey, %20, check %20, that %20. What's that? That's URL encoding. %20 is the encode of space. Okay. And then obviously you would need to have URL encoding for like a question mark and so on. So anyway, back to what we're doing. And that's kind of why you want to do it the official way rather than hard coding, because as soon as you introduce ant signs or question marks, Python is not going to necessarily know which you meant. So that's why you want to do it the official way that we're doing right now. So first we encode values. Okay, so we've encoded values as the data that we want to post in. Then what we want to do is we're going to say now data equals data.encode. And we want to encode this as UTF-8. This is just a type of encoding. Okay, so it basically puts your data in bytes. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say rec for request equals urllib.request.capital request. Ooh, I can't talk. What do we want to request? The URL, and then data. So first the URL, then any of the data that we want to pass through, and we've encoded that data, and we've encoded it under UTF-8. Okay, so we're going to request now from this URL, pythonprogramming.net. We're going to pass the following variables: s equals basic, submit equals search, and then after rec, we're going to say resp for response equals urllib.request.url open rec. Okay, so now we're actually urllib.request.url open. We're actually visiting the URL now, like we did right up here. So the syntax is identical, and really we just see that we had to do all of this first. So anyway, we've done that. Then we're going to say resp data equals resp.read, and then let's go ahead and print resp data. So we're going to visit pythonprogramming.net. We're going to pass through those variables. And then we're going to read the results. And again, the results are going to be like the source code of the results. So it's going to be a little messy, but hopefully we'll be able to read a little bit here. So we'll save and run it. Apparently, sometimes it takes a second to like run. There we go. So it visits it, and then here is the messy junk that we get. Pretty big mess. I'm hoping we can find something that's actual text. Yeah, so here's some text here. Paragraph Python 3 Basics tutorial. If something, do something. This tutorial is a part of the Python 3 tutorial series for beginners, and so on. So there is, there's some content there. We're not quite sure yet how to pull that content out, but nonetheless, we did visit the website and we downloaded all the data. So what your browser does for you, and what HTML does, is HTML basically tells your browser how it should display data, but that's really it. So your browser handles the HTML and makes it pretty for you and separates tags from text and organizes things, whereas with Python's just going to look at the source. You have no organization here, right? So now what I'd like to have us do is change one more thing. And so here we're making a request, right? So we've done a request. So we've done a get, really. This was a get, very simple just because that's the default, so we didn't have to change anything. And then we've made a post, and we've made that post based on data that we've decided to set. But now we come to a problem that is something that you'll meet fairly soon come across, and that is whenever you want to visit a website using Python or any programming language, sometimes the website owners don't like that. They don't want you on their website with a robot or a program or whatever. They only want real users on their website. So they will block you if they sense that you're not a real user. Now, luckily for us, this is actually somewhat easy to fool, basic systems anyways. There are some more complex ones. Google just recently made another update and has made it slightly more difficult to cheat their system, but still you can overcome these things usually fairly easily. It's almost like some sort of filter, right? If you're not good enough, you can't use it, but if you're good enough, I guess you can use their services still with your program. That said, usually websites that block your access, they do it because they offer an API and they want you to use their API. Google offers an API. So try to use Google's API before you cheat Google. Try to use Wikipedia's API before you start cheating Wikipedia and just programming your way around it. Because the API is going to make it easier on Wikipedia, and it's going to make it easier on you too, because they don't need to send all of the HTML data. They don't need to serve advertisements, right? Because your program isn't going to read it. That kind of stuff. So you do have to kind of pay a little bit of attention there as far as if they have an API or not. Now, moving along, now we're going to need to, I guess we'll show an example. So for now, I'm just going to comment this stuff out, so we're not doing that over and over. And now I'm going to come down here. And first, let's go and make a try and accept here. We're going to say try x equals urllib.request.url open. And the URL we're going to attempt to open is https://www.google.com/search and then question mark. So we're defining a variable here. We're going to say q equals test. So Q stands for query for Google. So we're going to attempt to visit this URL. So this is a search request for the string text. So this is as if you had went to Google and you typed in test in the search bar, you hit enter. So we're going to attempt to do that. So now that we've done that, we'll come down here and we'll say save file equals open. Actually, you know what? I don't even want to do this. I am positive this will fail. So now instead what we'll do is we'll just do print x.read. That should be enough. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to say accept exception as E, and then we're going to print string E. So what we're going to do here, again, attempt to visit Google, do a search query, then we're going to read the results, the source code of the results, and we're going to try to do that. Otherwise, we're going to throw the exception as E, and then we'll print the string version of that exception. So let's go ahead and run that and just see what happens to us. So we run that, and we get HTTP error 403 forbidden. We're forbidden because Google says, hey, you're a program, and we're going to go ahead and say no. Okay, so if you happen to find yourself in this situation, here's how you get around it. So we try to accept that, we fail. Now, what can we do? So let's make some more space, and now let's switch this up a little bit. We're going to do try, and I guess what we'll do, we'll use some of the same code up here, but we'll retype it. So we're going to try URL equals, and we'll use the exact same URL. So I'm just going to say URL equals this. So copy, paste the URL. Then we're going to go ahead and say headers equals an empty dictionary. And what headers are basically what the data you send in. You send in a header every time you visit a website, and it contains information on you. Who you are, your IP, your browser, your operating system, all kinds of stuff. It just sends in a bunch of information on you. And so within your headers, there is a piece of data that is called user agent. So now that we've got headers defined, let's make some more space. And we'll say headers, and then square brackets to define a piece of data in this dictionary. And we're going to call this piece of data user-agent. So user agent is the type of browser basically that you are using. So in our case, what Python does is it says python-url lib / and then your Python version. So for me it would be 3.4. So within almost an instant, when you visit a website with Python using the methods that we've shown so far, that website knows exactly what you are. They know you're a program. So it's very easy for them to shut you down because you send in you basically say, hello, knock knock, my name is Python, right? And then their servers say, hell no, and they shut you out. So now what we want to do is we're going to say user agent, and the user agent that we're going to use is a little long. I don't want to have to type it out, so I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste it like this, and I'll just put a link to it in the description. If I happen to forget, someone remind me, but hopefully I won't. So paste. And we get this long user agent here. You can't even really see it all in my window, but this is it. Okay, so super long user agent. Basically, this tells, well, this acts like we're using Mozilla, and then it gives all this other information and all this compatibility stuff. And so basically, it just changes that we're no longer are we announcing ourselves as Python. Sorry about that, I have no idea where I left off. I'll just kind of start at this point here. Turns out my dog knows how to open a sliding glass door, so he was running around in here when he shouldn't have been. That was very surprising. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so here we're replacing our user agent, and so in an attempt to fool Google, so we'll see if we can. So there's our user agent. Now we're going to do basically the same thing we did before, and we're going to say rec equals url lib dot request dot capital request, and then we're going to make the request to the URL, and then we're going to go ahead and remember before we said data. Well, we're not going to pass through any data here because we're like hard coding it in, right? Under normal circumstances, you would maybe say, like if we're making a post request, we could do that, and then we would add in the whole search data or the values and make the post. But instead, we're just going to hard code this for now. Feel free to mix them on your own time. Homework assignment. URL, and then we're going to say headers equals headers. Okay, so we're telling Python now to visit this URL, and instead of setting our normal headers, the default parameter headers, we're going to change these up and call the headers this. Now, in my opinion, it just kind of makes a little bit of sense to eventually go into urllib.request.request. That's a function, and in that function it has function parameters, and they define a default value for headers. Why not just go in there, edit the URL lib function there, and make this your default header? Just a thought for some of you guys. Anyway, moving right along. So now we've defined what the request is. Now we're going to say response equals urllib.request.url open, and the URL we want to open basically is request with the following thing as our headers. So that's our response. Now we're going to say resp data equals resp.read, and now the amount of data here is actually kind of big, right? Because there's a whole search result page and all the HTML that goes with it. It's very big and bulky, and so if we run this right now and we were just to print it out to console, it would lag the console fairly well. So we don't want to do that. So instead what we'll do is we're going to say save file equals open, and we're going to call this file with headers.txt. We're going to open it with the intention to write. Then we're going to say save file.write, and then we're going to write, we have to write the string version of RESP data, because right now the response data isn't in string format. So that's also kind of new-ish if you're coming from Python 2.7. And then, of course, we need to do save file.close. Now, the other thing we have not done is we did a try, and we have no accept yet. So we're going to say accept exception as E, and then we're going to go ahead and print string E just in case we throw an exception. Hopefully we don't. Unless I screwed up or something, we shouldn't. Then we're going to come over here. This is where that file will go, is it'll just go right over here. And we should be ready to run this, so let's go ahead and save and run that. And the first one will throw, I can't remember, yeah, okay, so the first one throws the forbidden, yeah, because we're still trying this, but the second one worked because we didn't see a forbidden. We come over here, here it is with headers. We can open it with Notepad++, and here's all of our data. So obviously it's a bunch of junk, you know, but this is all search results. There were some images there. Eventually we could maybe get to some sort of text or something, but anyway, this is a huge mess. Google results are pretty messy, but anyway, we were able to get by Google's little filter for just anybody, right? So, but if anybody had just read the documents, you'd find out how easy it is to change your headers. But a lot of people don't read documents, so I guess that's why. So that's going to conclude the basics of URL lib. Now, again, the data where we're fed back is just this huge mess of data. Like, what do we even do with all this data? So then you have to kind of parse through the data. So the next thing that we're going to need to learn is regular expressions to actually parse through this data. Now, regular expressions are kind of scary to people sometimes, mostly because it's its own programming language entirely. So everything you know about Python up till now doesn't mean anything for when it comes to regular expressions. But luckily, regular expressions, being their own programming language basically, are transferable. Pretty much anywhere you go, the rules of regular expressions will remain. So once you understand the logic of regular expressions, you can take it to any language. It's a lot like SQL, right? If you learn SQL, or as the cool kids say it, SQL, it's its own programming language, and you can take it anywhere to any other programming language and work with SQL or SQL, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I do just want to say that we're going to be covering regular expressions very soon, and then after we cover it, we'll mesh regular expressions with URL lib. So a lot like your basic programs are just a combination of your complex programs rather are just a combination of very basic tools. Even some of these really complex tasks are a lot of times just a combination of really basic modules and tools that you already have. Maybe not if statements and all that, but you know, URL lib plus regular expressions equals a pretty darn good website parser already. You could also use something like Beautiful Soup. But if you look into Beautiful Soup, most of what Beautiful Soup is URL lib and regular expressions. So anyway, that's going to conclude this video. If you guys have any questions or comments about URL lib, please feel free to leave them below. If you guys have any requests about more information on URL lib or some of the other built-in site packages or even third-party modules that you want me to cover, film in the series right now. So if you happen to do it, you know, fairly recently to when this video is posted, I'll probably be able to include it in the series. So anyway, that's it. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support and subscriptions, and until next time.